All right. So the next section we're going to talk about is transcendentalism, and we kind of discussed this before. The easiest way to remember transcendentalism is that it's like the hippies, okay? It's this idea that you could transcend the basics of life by kind of becoming one with nature, okay? This is kind of the beginning of this. And it's an outgrowth of enlightenmentism, whenever the thought was that we should apply science to everything. These people are going to try and understand the universe through its rules. You're going to have some pretty famous guys with this. Guys like Henry David Thoreau is going to be in there. Walt Whitman is going to be in there. And they're going to believe in the infinite benevolence of God. If you don't know what that means they believe in a God that is loving and will watch out for you. It's kind of the opposite of deism. Deism was that God invented the world like a clockmaker, wound it up, and then just left it alone. These guys would say, no, God is a loving God. And the way to understand God is to understand nature, okay? They also believed in what they would have called the divinity of man. Now that seems really weird to us because we think of the word divinity as meaning God, which would say that they believe that man is God. That's not really what they're saying. What they're saying here is man is the only creation that was created in God's image. So we are like a portion of God. We are like the leader of the world. These guys are going to reject secular authority. They're going to be very much peaceniks. A lot of them are going to be anti-war people when the Mexican War breaks out. They're just not going to like any kind of organized government. Today, these guys will be members of the Libertarian Party, okay? And if you know anything about libertarians, they're all just a little bit nuts, okay? So if you believe that man is divine, that man is in the image of God, then you have to believe that it would be immoral for man to enslave another man. So a lot of these guys end up becoming abolitionists. The abolitionist movement is going to grow right out of this. If I go too fast, y'all let me know. Here's a couple of the big guys here, Ralph Waldo Emerson and Henry David Thoreau. And again, we talked about these guys, but you'll have to read them in college more than likely. At least if you get a liberal arts degree, you'll have to read a little bit of this stuff. Ralph Waldo Emerson's stuff was much more focused on the importance of ecology and taking care of nature and man's stewardship. While Henry David Thoreau, he wrote about that kind of stuff in his book Walden, but he also talked about civil disobedience. If you don't know what civil disobedience is, it's the act of disobeying an unjust law. This guy said, he was thinking of Jesus here, he said that it is the responsibility of man to disobey a law that is corrupt, okay? So just because the government says this is what you have to do doesn't mean you should do it. And what he would quote here is Jesus overturning the taxman's tables. Very much against that. So much so that he refuses to pay his taxes and he gets thrown in prison during the Mexican War because he doesn't want his money going to fund an imperialistic war. So resistance to civil disobedience, he wrote it while in prison for civil disobedience. Okay? By the way, guys like Martin Luther King Jr. and Gandhi are going to be heavily influenced by this later on. So, these were the great reformers. And much like, modern hippies that we have today, these guys are going to be looking to increase liberty for people. They want to give freedom to the slaves. Now, all of these guys are not going to be completely, we're all equal. There's going to be some of those guys like William Lloyd Garrison that wants to free the slaves, but also wants to ship them off somewhere else. They want to ship them off to Africa. They do believe in giving well-being to the poor. They think the government should be taking care of the poor. There should be a government program for them. In the meantime, churches are doing it, but they think in the long run the government will have to. They want to open up massive public schools to help the ignorant. By the way, this word ignorant does not mean stupid. It means uneducated, okay? So if you were called ignorant in the traditional sense, that would not mean you were stupid. It would just mean you never had a chance to go to school. Health to the sick. They would open up hospitals all over the place. Peace and justice to society, okay? Everybody's not going to like this. Nathaniel Hawthorne, the great writer, is going to be a critique of it. In the Blithedale Romance, he said that their pursuit of the ideal had led to a distorted view of human nature and possibilities. What he meant by that is you need to live in the world as it is, not as you want it to be. Don't look at the world through rose-colored glasses. One should accept the world as imperfect. His books were kind of responses to that. The Scarlet Letter, House of the Seven Gables. You know the story of the Scarlet Letter. The lady is an adulteress and she gets branded with a scarlet A for adulteress. That was a story that was kind of written in response to this idea that everybody can just get along and we can be wonderful. All right, so when we started this section in the last lecture, we talked about the idea that there was this seeking of perfection. We call those utopian communities. And they appeared all over the place, all around here. They're going to start up here in New York, but they're going to spread everywhere. We're going to call this the burned over districts. Some of these communities, like the Oneida that we talked about, believe that we were in the last days. They were looking at Christ. They believe that Christ had already returned. He was alive. And any day now, you know, that Christ child would rise up and lead us to the end days. Well, if that's the case, you might as well enjoy life while you're here. And in the Oneida community, it was really a free love community. All the men were married to all the women. And it was very much a sex combo. John Humphrey Noyes is the founder of it. It is not going to last. Probably because, I mean, look at this guy's face. Who wants to sleep with him, right? But anytime you have that kind of community, it's probably going to have problems, okay? There were also some secular utopian communities that had nothing to do with religion. They were really more about, this is the key, self-fulfillment. These are communities that are going, you know, it's not necessarily about God. That the spark of the divine is inside each one of us. We are all our own gods. And our purpose should be to live our life to the fullest and do whatever we want to. It's a hedonistic idea, okay? You had guys like George Ripley that formed Brook Farm. That was another big utopian free love community that existed for a while. Today it's a museum. You can go to it. It did go out of business. Skipping some of this stuff. New Harmony, Indiana was one. This was the plans for New Harmony. It just sounds like a Christian utopia. Here's some pictures of it so you can kind of get a feel for what it would look like at the time period. It looks like a nice place to live. All right. Dorothea Dix, you must know her. She ends up on the end of course exams frequently. So make a note to yourself, Dorothea Dix. She's going to die at the very end of this period, in 1887. But she's going to be the first person to try and focus prisons on reform instead of punishment. Before this, a prison was really just a holding cell. They weren't trying to fix you. You were being punished, and the thought was if we punish you enough, then when you're released, you won't want to come back here and you'll be good. She said, no, a penitentiary should be preparing you for life. It should be giving you skills. She started saying prisons should teach you things. You should have classes. So when you get released back into society, you don't have to go back to a life of crime. That's a new idea at this time period, okay? And I don't know if she's right or not. I think there's got to be a combination of the two, but it was interesting anyway. She also is the first person to come up with the idea of a mental hospital, the lunatic asylum. But it was you got to realize that before this, if you were crazy, you didn't go to a hospital, you went to prison or you died, okay? The answer in the period before this for why you were crazy was you were possessed by spirits. She says, no, these people are sick. We need to care for them. So the asylums are going to start moving more towards hospitals. I mean, the way to think of this, these asylums in the start of this period were more like the asylum in the Batman movies, you know, where all the villains are, okay? That's kind of what the world was like before Dorothea Dix. After it, they're more like hospitals, okay? Anybody ever been to the one in Rusk? Seen it? If you ever go down to it, you can take a tour through it, and they'll take you through the old part. Well, I don't think they can anymore because they just got through doing a remodel. They may have knocked it over. But you could go through the old part, and the beds all had like manacles on it that they would chain you down on and stuff. It was rough. All right, temperance. Temperance is a move to end drunkenness. It was this society, the American Temperance Society, was founded by Frances Willard. She has ended up on the end of course exam STAR test a lot too. So make sure you know Frances Willard. The other big family is the Beechers. The Beechers were a highly religious family. Most of the men were pastors. You probably don't know this name, but it may sound familiar because you know one of the daughters that got married, Harriet Beecher Stowe, wrote Uncle Tom's Cabin. She was part of this family, okay? And they start off as part of this anti-temperance society that are trying to end alcoholism. They call alcohol demon rum. And they started blaming alcohol for most of the world's problems. And I think you could justifiably blame alcohol for some of the world's problems. This is just a map of annual consumption in the United States. This is annual alcohol consumption. Look at what was going on about 1830. Alcohol consumption is through the roof. This is about the time that the Temperance Society is founded, and it has a dramatic drop, okay? So it kind of shows you just how rough things have gotten. Massive amounts of alcohol being consumed. This is a pretty famous engraving called Drunkard's Progress, and if you see it, you've got this guy here that's kind of a gentleman having a drink and everything's fine. And things are good. Alcohol is relaxing and you like it and you're successful in business and all this. And there's a level where you hit this peak and then it starts having the bad effects on you. And you end up with this guy falling into his grave at the end. I've seen that on an AP test. I've seen it on a STAR test before. It's just it's a Temperance Society piece of propaganda, okay, from 1846.
Why do they do that? I don't know, they keep doing it, it's just,
What's that?
Angelina, with all three of us are getting messages saying.
Oh, the rave alerts?
Evacuation stuff.
Yeah. I think what they're doing is they're testing each building, they're testing one building a day, and it's driving us all crazy.
They ain't done it in like a week and they start doing it.
Yeah. All right, so let's talk about social reform a little bit because prostitution is a big problem at this time. Now, why would prostitution be a big problem? Well, this is the age of immigration. We had massive amounts of people immigrating to America. And frankly, if you're an unskilled female that doesn't speak English, that's a job that's available to you, okay? And in the big city, there's a lot of it, okay? Prostitution is a big problem. This lady, Sarah Ingram, worked hard to try and solve this problem. What's interesting is she is not out trying to punish the girls. She does not see the girls as criminals. She sees the girls as victims of Johns and pimps, okay? So she's got the police out busting people for participating in it, but not busting the women that are doing it. And the thought being, if you attack that side, the other side won't make any money, it'll just die off. So her idea is that women are kind of being forced into it. And I think it makes a lot of sense to me, okay? I don't understand prostitution, I don't get it. I don't understand why in this country something is illegal to sell that you can give away for free, but it's the way it is. It's just weird to me. But it was common everywhere until this period. This is about the time when prostitution became illegal. And it's remained that way everywhere in the United States except for Nevada. Because we're in this massive religious growth period, we're going to have all these new schools start to appear. Colleges or seminaries to make your ministers. But in our public schools, we're going to shift to secular education, okay? So our schools are going to start focusing on what do we need to do to make you scientists and mathematicians and lawyers, instead of just trying to make everybody a preacher, okay? By 1860, every state, every state offered free public education. By the way, Texas was the last of the original continent of the United States to require attendance of public education. Our kids were stupid and we wanted to keep them that way. Why would that be? Anybody get any idea? Why would Texas be against public education so long? If your kids get educated, they move out and they go get a job. They're not staying home working the farm. We wanted the kids to stay here. We needed them to work the farm. Kind of terrifying. All right, this guy Horace Mann's pretty important. We call him the father of American education. He kind of invented the schoolhouses we have today. We all teach in Horace Mann schools. He was very much this idea that every child, he described children as clay and said that a good teacher could mold a child into whatever they wanted to be. Would not have thought that you were born with a certain amount of intellect. He was very much that everybody's an open container and can be, if the right people present the information, they can learn it. I don't know that I agree. He was against corporal punishment. That was a new idea because schools really use corporal punishment pretty heavy. And the very first state teaching colleges were developed at this time period. They were called normal schools. So if you're ever doing like family history and you see like your grandmother went to a normal school, that means she went to school to be a teacher. Okay? The most famous books around at the time, this is what you would have read if you were learning to read, was the McGuffey Eclectic Readers. These remain the most important of the readers right up until the mid-1900s. Your grandparents may have learned to read on some of these. Now, there are modern versions. But they were interesting because they very much use parables from the Bible to try and teach things. Don't write on my desk.
No, right now, I was poking one of his eyelashes.
So schools were kind of in a factory model. You ever wonder why we have bells in school? You ever thought about that? It starts at this time period. And the reason why was because we wanted to teach students how to be prepared for the workforce. And in the workforce, there's a bell that tells you when you start in the factories, and there's a bell that tells you when you go to lunch, and there's a bell that tells you when you get to go home. So it was very much about training you to be in an industrial society, okay? We have that. We wanted to teach respect for order. That's why in elementary school, you stand in line, and you're walking so quietly in line. It's about teaching order and control. It dates back to this time period. The saying was you got to teach people the 3 R's. Is it 3 R's?
Nope.
Anybody know the 3 R's?
This one right
I
here?
get news for you, only one of them's an R. It's reading, writing, and arithmetic.
I was gonna say reading and writing.
Yeah, reading, writing, and arithmetic. Of course, arithmetic starts with an A and writing starts with a W, but It's what we call, you gotta teach the three R's. And also have to teach the Protestant work ethic. That's this idea that we should work hard. And have you ever heard somebody say they pulled themselves up by their own bootstraps, or they're a self-made man? That's a Protestant work ethic. The belief that you can start with nothing, and if you work hard enough, you can be anything you want. The American dream. Anyone can be president, right? Even though statistically, you can't be president unless you're a white man that was born to a wealthy family, in most cases. A couple of key women educators, Emma Willard from Troy, founded a female seminary. This is the first school for women that offered math, physics, history, and geography. Before this, women learned literature, but it was usually believed that women were not smart enough to do math. So we didn't even bother trying to teach women math. By the way, women outscore us guys in math now. Mary Lyons established Mount Holyoke Academy as the first college exclusively for women. Mount Holyoke is still around. It's not just for women anymore, but it is still around. So there's big steps being made for women in this time period. This is a picture of a female seminary. This is Mount Holyoke. So we see women making progress. But for the most part, women still belong to what we call the cult of domesticity. That's just this belief that a woman needs to be protected from the real world, and her sphere of influence was the home. If it happened inside the house, the woman was in charge of it. Her job was to civilize her husband and her family. What does it mean to civilize? To make you fit for society. Okay? My mother used to tell me and my sisters, you heathens are uncivilized because we did stupid stuff. Like I'd take my sister to a tree in the front yard. But she stabbed me in the leg with a steak knife. You know, that's the kind of things we did. But a mother's job was to take care of that. That was the job of a female. Make you fit for civilized society. It's an interesting way. Check out this quote. This is from a Puritan minister in the 1830s. The power of woman is her dependence. A woman who gives up that dependence on man to become a reformer yields the power God has given her for her protection, and her character becomes unnatural. So this guy is saying it is completely unnatural for women to do anything outside of housewife. What do you think? Good plan, bad plan? Bad plan?
Good plan.
Good plan. I don't even like sandwiches.
So, what is the role of a female? Women were unable to vote, first off. The 19th Amendment is not going to be passed for quite some time yet. Legally, women were seen as minors. Minor with an O, not an E. They're not underground digging coal. This is children. What that means is you were considered the ward of your father until you married, and then you were the ward of your husband. The only time women had any real legal rights was if they were widowed. If you were widowed, you could inherit property and all that. Otherwise, it was owned by your husband or your father. If you were single, you could own your own property, but as soon as you got married, your property went under the control of your husband. Your children went under the control of your husband. In most states, it doesn't say it just says could not, but in most states, women could not initiate a divorce. They could get divorced, but it had to be initiated by the husband. So a husband could file for divorce, but a wife couldn't. Women were not allowed to make wills. They couldn't sign a contract without their husband there or their father. You couldn't bring a suit in court without your husband's permission. Guys, this is the good old days. She's about to stab me for that. All right, what's going on in this picture? This is a editorial cartoon from the time period. It says, what it would be like if ladies had their own way.
She's leaving.
Yeah, the women are all fancy, getting in their cart, going out for a day on the town. What are the men doing?
They're in a field.
Doing housework.
Doing laundry, washing the baby, sewing. This is what people thought. If we let women think for themselves, they're going to turn the world upside down, and the men are going to have to stay home and do all this work. Didn't exactly turn out that way. So, we're going to have these women that, because they feel like they're enslaved in their own homes, they start to have a little bit of sympathy for African slaves. You know, if you hate the way you're being treated as a domestic, maybe you sympathize for others don't. You got the Grimke sisters, Angelina and Sarah. Poor Sarah Grimke, look at her. Oh, that woman's so ugly she could be JC's prom date.
Damn.
Right?
So, they're Southern abolitionists. Lucy Stone over here founds the American Women's Suffrage Association. By the way, you will almost always see this called NAWSA, the National American Women's Suffrage Association, NAWSA. So they're starting to think that maybe we should fight for black rights, because if we can get black rights, maybe women will get rights too. They become tied together, okay? I'm going to skip that one. There is going to be a bit of a fight. In 1840s, there's going to be an argument at the World Anti-Slavery Convention over the rights of abolition. And that's what they're going to fight over is do we have to connect women's rights with abolitionism? Here are two of our biggest women suffragists, Lucretia Mott and Elizabeth Cady Stanton. At Seneca Falls, they're going to write the Declaration of Sentiments. This is often just called the Seneca Falls Declaration. I swear to you, all they did was take the Declaration of Independence and insert the words "and women." Every place you see, like, all men are created equal, it would say all men and women are created equal. That's really all it is. These are the signers of the Seneca Falls Declaration. You can go to the monument there.
There's enough of them. There's enough of them.
There was a lot of them. We talked about abolitionism a little bit and how some people wanted to remove the freed slaves. That group was called the American Colonization Society. They believed in emancipation, but they thought it should be gradual and voluntary for a while. The thought was the state should not just come free everybody because they're taking property, but they should encourage people to free them. This was the symbol of the British Colonization Society. By the way, England outlawed slavery before we did. We were the last industrialized country in the world to outlaw it. But it says, "Am I not a man and a brother?" I think this is a very powerful symbol. It's a black man enslaved, and it's saying, "Look, I'm your brother." Very, very powerful. We already talked about how they wanted to create this free state in Liberia. We're going to send all the slaves there. We actually did do that. The capital of Liberia is a place called Monrovia, named after James Monroe. Sadly, it's been in civil war for quite some time now. This is a reader, one of those McGuffey readers about abolitionism. They would oftentimes teach kids their alphabet with propaganda. A is for abolitionist, a man who wants to be free. B is for brother with a skin of a somewhat darker hue. C is the cotton field to which this injured brother is driven. D is the driver, cold and stern, who follows whip in hand. It's a way of teaching you about things while you're learning the alphabet. So if you're given this as a child, this is going to influence your understanding of the world. This handsome fella here is William Lloyd Garrison. Again, He wants immediate emancipation with no compensation. He would say, we need to free the slaves, and you shouldn't pay the people for them because they shouldn't have owned them to begin with, okay? Slavery is not an economic issue, it's a moral issue. Garrison would say it's immoral to own people. I agree with him up to this point. Now, after this, Garrison is going to be an incredible racist that wants to ship them all off to Liberia. But to this point, Garrison makes a lot of sense to me. He wrote a book called The Liberator, or a newspaper. And The Liberator was the biggest of the abolitionist newspapers. Starts in 1831. Skipping some of this because you can't really see it. There's a bunch of these guys. Lewis Tappan, Arthur Tappan, James Birney. James Birney runs for president, loses dramatically. But there's a bunch of these guys out there that are all abolitionists. Let's pick up with black abolitionists on the next one because I'm losing my voice.